Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm about to dive into some absolutely wild Reddit stories that'll keep you locked in for the next however long this video ends up being. Whether you're studying, working, or just need something to keep your brain occupied while you do literally anything else, these stories are going to do exactly that. We've got betrayal, revenge, family drama, and like always, workplace drama. Before we get started, shout out to Sean Bryson for sending a super thanks on the last video. I really appreciate your generosity. Also, if anyone else wants to support the channel, consider becoming a member to get early access to my videos and help choose the topics I cover next. I'll be rolling out these features in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. Lastly, I've noticed a lot of you are watching from work. If that's you, drop a comment and tell me what job you're working. I'd love to know who has the most interesting one. Or let me know if you're just watching from bed. Anyways, get comfortable. And let's jump into these stories. And hey, if you're still here by the end, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button because I spend way too much time finding this content for you. Alright, let's start with this first one. I thought my roommate was stealing my food until I caught my girlfriend red-handed. I'm 24, been living with my roommate Jake for about 8 months now. Great guy, clean, pays his bills on time, never brings random people over at weird hours. We split groceries pretty evenly, each buy our own stuff, and generally stay out of each other's way. About 3 months ago, I started noticing my food going missing. Nothing dramatic at first, just small things. A yogurt here, some leftover pizza there, maybe a sandwich I swore I'd saved for lunch the next day. I figured maybe I was just forgetting what I'd eaten, or maybe Jake was grabbing something in a pinch and would replace it later. But then it got worse. Entire meals I'd prepped for the week would vanish overnight. I'd buy a pack of those fancy protein bars, and half of them would be gone by morning. My special coffee creamer, the expensive kind I splurge on, would disappear faster than it should have. I started getting genuinely annoyed because this stuff adds up, you know? I didn't want to be that roommate who makes a big deal over food, so I started keeping mental notes. Monday, made 4 chicken meals for meal prep. Tuesday morning, only 2 left. Wednesday, bought a dozen bagels. Thursday, 6 missing. It was becoming undeniable that someone was helping themselves to my stuff. The logical suspect was Jake. He was the only other person with access to the apartment, and I'd seen him eyeing my fancy groceries before. Plus, he'd made a few comments about how he wished he could afford the organic stuff I buy, how his budget was pretty tight lately. I felt bad for the guy, but not bad enough to fund his grocery habits without him asking. I decided to have a conversation with him. Nothing confrontational, just a casual, hey, maybe we could work out a system if you need to borrow food sometimes. Jake looked genuinely confused when I brought it up. He swore up and down that he wasn't touching my stuff. Seemed actually offended that I'd suggest it. But what else was I supposed to think? Things got tense between us after that. Jake started acting weird around me, like he was walking on eggshells. I felt guilty for accusing him, but my food was still disappearing. If anything, it got worse after our conversation. Entire containers of leftovers would vanish. Fresh fruit I'd just bought would be gone within hours. I was starting to think Jake was taking my food out of spite now, like some weird passive-aggressive revenge for calling him out. The atmosphere in the apartment became uncomfortable. We barely talked beyond basic pleasantries. I started keeping some of my groceries in my bedroom, which felt absolutely ridiculous, but I was desperate. Then my girlfriend Lisa started staying over more often. She'd been coming around maybe once or twice a week, but suddenly she was there almost every night. Said her apartment was having heating issues and her roommate was being dramatic about something. I didn't mind. I loved having her around, and she always offered to help with groceries when she stayed over. Actually, Lisa was amazing about it. She'd show up with ingredients to cook dinner for both of us, would replace anything she used from my kitchen, even bought extra coffee and snacks for when she was there. I thought it was sweet how considerate she was being, especially compared to what I thought Jake was doing. One night, Lisa suggested we set up a camera in the kitchen to catch Jake in the act. She was genuinely outraged on my behalf, said it was completely unacceptable for him to be stealing from me and lying about it. She even offered to buy one of those small security cameras, said we could hide it behind the coffee maker where it wouldn't be obvious. I felt weird about essentially spying on my roommate, but I was so frustrated and the situation was affecting my living situation so badly that I agreed. We set up this tiny camera, angled it so it would catch anyone going through the fridge or pantry. Lisa was almost excited about it, said she couldn't wait to prove what a liar Jake was being. The camera recorded for 3 days. I was working late that Thursday night. Wouldn't be home until almost midnight. Lisa had stayed over, but said she was going to bed early because she had an early morning meeting. When I got home, she was already asleep, and I crashed without thinking about checking the camera footage. Friday morning, I remembered to check the recording while I was having coffee. I fast-forwarded through hours of empty kitchen footage, expecting to catch Jake sneaking around at some point. Instead, what I saw made my stomach drop through the floor. There was Lisa, around 11 p.m, going through my fridge like she owned the place. She wasn't just grabbing a quick snack or something she needed for a recipe. She was systematically taking my meal prep containers, my expensive yogurts, my protein bars, loading them into her bag. She even took condiments, stuff I'd specifically bought because I like certain brands. I watched her make multiple trips, filling what looked like a cooler bag with my groceries. She was being careful and quiet, clearly trying not to wake me up, except I wasn't even home yet. The timestamp showed she'd been at this for almost 20 minutes, just casually robbing me blind while I thought she was asleep in my bed. The worst part was seeing her eat some of my food right there in the kitchen. She opened one of my meal prep containers and ate half of it standing at the counter, then put the rest in her bag, like she was sampling the goods before deciding what to steal. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, watching my girlfriend of 8 months systematically steal from me, while simultaneously encouraging me to blame my innocent roommate. The level of manipulation was staggering. She'd been playing concerned girlfriend, offering to help catch the thief, even buying a camera to gather evidence against someone she knew was completely innocent. When Lisa woke up that morning, I didn't say anything immediately. I was too shocked, too angry, trying to process what I'd discovered. She acted completely normal, kissed me goodbye, said she'd see me that evening, even made a comment about hoping we'd catch Jake on camera soon. I spent the entire day at work replaying the footage in my head, thinking about all the times she'd offered to bring groceries, all her concerned comments about Jake, how outraged she'd acted on my behalf. She'd been stealing from me for months, while positioning herself as my ally against the supposed real thief. That evening, when Lisa came over with takeout for dinner, acting like the perfect girlfriend, I finally confronted her. I showed her the footage without any preamble, just opened my laptop and pressed play. The look on her face went from confusion to recognition to pure panic in about 5 seconds. She tried to deny it at first, said the video was unclear, maybe it was someone else. When that didn't work, she switched to justification, said she was basically living there half the time anyway, so it was really shared food. When I pointed out that she'd been encouraging me to blame Jake, she got defensive, said she never explicitly told me to accuse him. Then came the tears and the apologies. She claimed she was embarrassed about her financial situation, said she didn't want me to know she was struggling to afford groceries, said she was planning to tell me eventually that she was going to start contributing more to household expenses. Every excuse contradicted the last one. The relationship ended that night. I couldn't get past the manipulation, the way she'd let me damage my relationship with Jake, while she was the one causing all the problems. She'd sat there listening to me stress about the missing food, watching me feel guilty for suspecting my roommate, all while being the actual culprit. Jake and I had a long conversation after Lisa left. I showed him the footage, apologised for months of suspicion and weird behaviour. He was honestly pretty cool about it, said he'd figured something else was going on, but didn't know what. We're back to being good roommates now, though I think we both learned something about assuming the worst about people. I still can't believe someone I trusted completely was stealing from me while helping me try to catch the supposed thief. The audacity of it still blows my mind. That story right there is exactly why trust issues exist. Imagine being so manipulative that you help your boyfriend set up surveillance to catch yourself stealing from him. The psychological games some people play are absolutely unhinged. Poor Jake probably thought he was living with a paranoid person for months. At least this guy found out before he moved in with her, or something even more serious. Let's move on to this next one. And honestly, this one's even more twisted. My sister tried to steal my identity to get out of her student loans. My sister Rebecca has always been the type to take shortcuts. Growing up, she'd copy my homework, forge our parents' signatures on permission slips, find ways to get out of doing chores by making elaborate excuses. I always figured she'd grow out of it, but apparently, some people just double down on being terrible as adults. Rebecca is 3 years younger than me, and we've never been particularly close. Different interests, different friend groups, different approaches to life. I worked through college, graduated with minimal debt, got a decent job in accounting. She partied her way through a more expensive school, racked up massive student loans, and graduated with a degree she's never really used. About 2 years ago, Rebecca's loan payments started coming due. We're talking serious money here, like $40,000 in debt from a combination of tuition, living expenses, and what I suspect was a lot of unnecessary spending during her college years. She got a job at a retail store, but it was barely covering her rent, let alone loan payments. I knew she was struggling because she'd started asking family members for money. Small amounts at first, 100 here, 50 there, always with some sob story about unexpected expenses or emergencies. Our parents helped when they could, but they're not wealthy people. I lent her money a few times too, though she never paid any of it back. Rebecca started getting really stressed about her financial situation. She'd complain constantly about how unfair it was that education was so expensive, how she shouldn't have to pay back money she used for bettering herself, how the system was designed to keep people in debt forever. Valid points, maybe, but complaining wasn't making the payments go away. Then she started talking about ways to get out of paying her loans. She'd researched bankruptcy, looked into income-driven repayment plans, even considered moving to another country to escape the debt. None of these options were realistic for her situation, but she was getting desperate. About 6 months ago, Rebecca started asking me weird questions about my financial situation, how much I made, what my credit score was, whether I had any major debts. I thought she was just comparing our situations, maybe feeling bad about her own choices. I didn't think much of it. She also started asking for copies of documents, said she needed help with her taxes, wanted to see how I'd organise my paperwork, needed examples of properly filled out forms. I helped her out, figured it was good that she was finally trying to get her finances in order. Looking back, I should have been suspicious when she asked for a copy of my social security card. She said she'd lost hers and needed the format to request a replacement. I thought it was a weird request, but she was my sister, and I trusted her. I made her a copy and didn't think about it again. The first sign something was wrong came when I got a call from my bank about unusual activity on my account. Someone had tried to open a credit card using my information, but there were inconsistencies in the application that flagged it for review. I figured it was just identity theft. Maybe someone had gotten my information from a data breach or something. I put a fraud alert on my credit report and didn't worry too much about it. These things happen, right? But then I got another call, this time from a different bank, about a loan application. Then another credit card company. Then a mortgage broker. Someone was definitely using my identity, and they were being aggressive about it. I pulled my credit report and found multiple hard inquiries, all recent, all for significant amounts of credit. Whoever was doing this wasn't just trying to get a quick cash advance. They were attempting to access serious money using my identity and credit score. The mortgage application was what really scared me. Someone had applied for a $200,000 home loan using my information. If that had gone through, I would have been legally responsible for a massive debt I never agreed to take on. I spent hours on the phone with credit agencies, banks, and fraud departments trying to sort out the mess. Everyone kept asking if I had any idea who might have access to my personal information. I kept saying no, it must be some random criminal who got my data somehow. Then I got a call that changed everything. A loan officer from Rebecca's student loan company called me by mistake. They were trying to reach her about a payment transfer request, but somehow they'd gotten my number. During the conversation, they mentioned that someone had been trying to transfer her loans to a different social security number, claiming there had been an error in the original application. That's when it clicked. I asked the loan officer what social security number they had on file for the transfer request. They couldn't give me the full number for privacy reasons, but they confirmed the last 4 digits, my last 4 digits. Rebecca had been trying to transfer her student loan debt to my social security number. She was attempting to make me legally responsible for her $40,000 in educational debt. All those credit applications, the mortgage inquiry, everything had been her trying to build up available credit under my name so she could handle the loan transfer. I confronted her immediately, called her while I was still on the phone with the loan company, asked her directly if she'd been using my identity to try to get out of her student loan payments. She hung up on me. When I showed up at her apartment an hour later, she tried to play innocent at first, said she had no idea what I was talking about. Maybe someone was using both our identities. What a crazy coincidence. But I had too much evidence by then. I'd brought copies of all the credit applications, the loan transfer request, even the timeline of when she'd asked me for various documents. Everything lined up perfectly with her attempts to steal my identity. Eventually, she broke down and admitted it. Said she was desperate, couldn't handle the debt payments, thought she could just transfer everything to my name, and I'd never find out. She actually seemed to think this was a reasonable plan, like I wouldn't notice taking on $40,000 in debt. The worst part was her justification. She said I made more money than her, had better credit, could handle the payments easier than she could, like that gave her the right to steal my identity and saddle me with her debt. She even suggested we could work out a payment plan where she'd pay me back gradually, as if that made identity theft acceptable. I reported her to the police that same day, filed reports with the credit agencies, the banks, everyone who needed to know that the applications had been fraudulent. It took weeks to clean up the mess she'd created, and I'm still monitoring my credit report obsessively. Rebecca was arrested 2 weeks later. She's been charged with identity theft, fraud, and a bunch of other things I don't fully understand. Our parents are devastated. Can't believe one of their daughters would do this to the other. I feel bad for them, but I couldn't just let this slide. The family relationships are pretty much destroyed now. Some relatives think I should have handled this privately, worked something out with Rebecca instead of involving law enforcement. But she stole my identity and tried to stick me with massive debt. That's not a family dispute, that's a crime. Rebecca's lawyer has been trying to negotiate some kind of plea deal, but I'm not interested in dropping the charges. She didn't just make a mistake or a bad decision. She systematically planned to ruin my financial life to solve her own problems. I still can't believe my own sister thought it was acceptable to steal my identity. The level of entitlement and selfishness is staggering. This is absolutely insane. Your own sister trying to transfer $40,000 in debt to your name and thinking you'd never notice. The audacity is breathtaking. And then having the nerve to suggest a payment plan after committing identity theft against her own family member. Some people really have no limits when it comes to selfishness. Good on him for pressing charges, because that kind of betrayal deserves serious consequences. Alright, this next story is going to make you question everything you think you know about workplace dynamics. My boss hired his girlfriend, and now I'm basically managing 2 people for the price of 1. I work at a mid-sized marketing agency downtown, been there for about 3 years, worked my way up from junior account coordinator to senior project manager. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but the pay is decent, the clients are manageable, and my boss Derek has always been pretty reasonable to work with. Derek's in his early 40s, divorced, has been running this agency for about 8 years. He's one of those guys who tries really hard to be the cool boss, talks about work-life balance, while expecting you to answer emails at 9 p.m. But overall, he's not terrible. He stays out of the day-to-day operations mostly, lets his managers actually manage, and doesn't micromanage every little decision. About 4 months ago, Derek started dating this woman named Vanessa. She's maybe 26, works in social media marketing at some startup. Definitely attractive in that Instagram influencer way. Derek was obviously smitten from the beginning, started talking about her constantly, showing everyone pictures of their weekend trips, the whole nauseating routine. I didn't think much of it at first. Derek's personal life was his business, and if he was happy, good for him. Plus, when the boss is in a good mood, it usually makes everyone's job easier. He was definitely more relaxed, less likely to stress about minor issues, more willing to approve budget increases for projects. Then Derek announced that Vanessa would be joining our team as a social media specialist. Said we'd been needing someone with her skill set anyway, and it was perfect timing since she was looking for new opportunities. He presented it like this brilliant business decision that had nothing to do with their relationship. The red flags were immediate. First, we hadn't been looking for a social media specialist. Our clients either handled their own social media or worked with external contractors. Second, Vanessa's resume was pretty thin. A couple years at a startup that folded, some freelance work, nothing that screamed senior level experience. Third, Derek offered her a salary that was about $15,000 more than what I was making when I started in a similar role. But Derek was the boss, and if he wanted to hire his girlfriend, that was his prerogative. I figured maybe she'd prove herself. Maybe she actually did have skills that weren't obvious from her resume. I tried to keep an open mind. Vanessa's first day was a disaster. Derek introduced her to everyone like she was some kind of social media guru, built up these massive expectations about how she was going to revolutionize our client strategies. Then he basically dumped her on me, said I'd be her supervisor and could help her get oriented. The problem became clear immediately. Vanessa had no idea how to work in a professional agency environment. She was used to the startup world where you just post whatever, whenever, with no client approval processes, no brand guidelines, no legal compliance issues. She couldn't understand why we needed 3 rounds of revisions on a simple Instagram post. Her first client presentation was painful to watch. She'd put together this elaborate social media strategy that completely ignored the client's target demographic, their brand voice, their budget constraints, everything we'd discussed in the briefing meeting. The client was polite but clearly confused about why we were suggesting TikTok dances for their law firm. After the meeting, I pulled Vanessa aside to give her some feedback, tried to be constructive, explained how our client approval process worked, suggested some resources for learning about different industries. She listened with this blank expression, then said she'd run everything by Derek first before making any changes. That became the pattern. Every piece of feedback I gave her, every suggestion for improvement, every attempt to train her on our processes, she'd immediately go to Derek and present it like I was being difficult or trying to sabotage her. Derek would then come to me and ask why I was being so hard on Vanessa, said she was just adjusting to a new environment and needed support. Meanwhile, Vanessa's work quality remained consistently terrible. She'd post content without client approval, use copyrighted images without licensing, ignore brand guidelines completely. I was spending hours every day fixing her mistakes, redoing her work, apologizing to clients for deliverables that should never have been sent out. The worst part was that Derek refused to see any of it. When clients complained about social media content, he'd blame miscommunication or unrealistic expectations. When I showed him examples of Vanessa's mistakes, He'd say she was still learning and everyone makes errors. When other team members started complaining about having to redo her work, he said they needed to be more collaborative. It became clear that Derek had no intention of actually managing Vanessa or holding her accountable for her performance. She was his girlfriend, and in his mind, that meant she was automatically qualified, and any criticism was just workplace politics. 3 months in, I was basically doing 2 full-time jobs. My regular project management responsibilities, plus fixing everything Vanessa touched, plus training her on basics she should have known before being hired. I was working 12-hour days regularly, staying late to repair client relationships, coming in early to review her work before it went out. I tried talking to Derek about the workload issue, explained that I was spending more time managing Vanessa's mistakes than doing my actual job, suggested maybe she needed more formal training or a different role that better matched her experience level. Derek's response was to tell me I was being territorial and needed to embrace change. The breaking point came during a major client campaign launch. We were handling social media for a product release. Everything had been planned for weeks. Content calendar approved, posts scheduled, influencer partnerships arranged. Vanessa decided at the last minute that the approved content was boring and completely changed the messaging without telling anyone. She posted content that contradicted the main advertising campaign, used unauthorized product photos, and included claims about the product that weren't legally approved. The client was furious, threatened to pull their account, demanded to know how something like this could happen. I spent the entire weekend doing damage control, working with legal to address the compliance issues, negotiating with the client to save the relationship, rebuilding the entire campaign from scratch. Vanessa, meanwhile, was at some music festival with Derek, posting Instagram stories about how great their relationship was. Monday morning, Derek called a team meeting to discuss what had gone wrong with the campaign. He presented it like it was a communication breakdown, a learning opportunity for everyone. Never mentioned that his girlfriend had single-handedly sabotaged weeks of work. Never acknowledged that I'd spent my weekend fixing her mess. That's when I realized this situation was never going to improve. Derek was never going to hold Vanessa accountable, because doing so would mean admitting he'd made a mistake hiring her. He'd rather sacrifice client relationships and employee morale than deal with the awkwardness of managing his girlfriend. I started looking for new jobs that same week, updated my resume, reached out to contacts, started interviewing with other agencies. I wasn't going to destroy my career covering for someone who had no business being in her position. 2 weeks later, I got an offer from a competing agency. Better salary, better title, better work environment. When I gave Derek my notice, he seemed genuinely shocked, asked what he could do to keep me, offered a raise, promised things would get better. I told him honestly that I couldn't continue doing 2 jobs for the price of one, that the situation with Vanessa was unsustainable, that I needed to work somewhere my contributions were valued. He got defensive, said I was being unprofessional bringing up personal relationships, that Vanessa was a valuable team member who just needed time to develop. My last day was 3 weeks ago. I heard through former colleagues that the client I'd spent the weekend saving ended up pulling their account anyway. 2 other team members have given notice since I left. Vanessa is apparently now the senior social media specialist, basically running the department she's completely unqualified to handle. Derek made his choice. He chose his girlfriend over his business, his employees, his client relationships. I just hope he thinks it was worth it when the agency falls apart. That right there is exactly how businesses destroy themselves from the inside. When the boss starts making hiring decisions with his heart instead of his brain, everyone else pays the price. This guy basically became an unpaid manager for someone who had no business being there in the first place. At least he got out before the whole ship went down completely. Now this next story is going to make you lose faith in humanity for entirely different reasons. I found out my best friend has been catfishing my ex-boyfriend for 2 years. My ex-boyfriend Tyler and I dated for about a year and a half in college. We broke up amicably when he transferred schools. Just one of those situations where long distance wasn't going to work for either of us. No drama, no hard feelings. We stayed in touch as friends and genuinely wished each other well. My best friend Hannah has been in my life since high school. We went to college together, lived in the same dorm freshman year, shared everything. She was the person I called when Tyler and I broke up, the one who brought me ice cream and listened to me cry about missing him, even though I knew the breakup was the right decision. After Tyler transferred, he started dating someone new pretty quickly. He'd mention her occasionally when we talked, said her name was Jessica, that they'd met through a dating app, that things were going really well. I was happy for him, honestly. Tyler's a good guy, and I wanted him to find someone who made him happy. Hannah seemed less thrilled about Tyler moving on. She'd make little comments about how quickly he'd found someone new, how he probably wasn't over me yet, how rebound relationships never last. I figured she was just being protective, maybe worried that I was more hurt about his new relationship than I was letting on. About 6 months after Tyler transferred, Hannah started acting weird about her own dating life. She'd always been pretty open about the guys she was seeing, would show me their dating app profiles, ask for advice about what to wear on dates, debrief every interaction in exhaustive detail. Suddenly she became secretive. She'd get text messages and smile at her phone, then quickly put it away when I asked who she was talking to. She started declining plans, saying she had dates, but being vague about who with. When I'd ask how things went, she'd just say they were going well and change the subject. I thought maybe she'd found someone she really liked and was being cautious about jinxing it. Hannah had a tendency to get excited about guys too quickly and then be devastated when things didn't work out. Maybe she was trying to protect herself by keeping this relationship more private. The secrecy went on for months. Hannah would disappear for hours at a time, claiming to be on dates or video calls with her mystery boyfriend. She'd mention him occasionally, always in vague terms, said his name was Jake, that he lived in another state, that they were taking things slow because of the distance. Something about the situation felt off to me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Hannah seemed happy, was smiling more, seemed more confident. If she'd found someone who made her feel good about herself, why was she being so secretive about it? About a year into Hannah's mysterious relationship, I was visiting Tyler at his new school. We'd maintained our friendship, and I had some free time during spring break, so I drove down to see how he was settling in. It was nice catching up in person, seeing his new apartment, meeting some of his friends. During dinner, Tyler started talking about Jessica, his girlfriend, how sweet she was, how much they had in common, how easy it was to talk to her about anything. He seemed really smitten, which made me genuinely happy for him. Then he showed me a picture of them together from a recent date, except there was no Jessica in the picture. It was just Tyler, alone, holding his phone like he was taking a selfie with someone, but the other half of the photo was empty. When I asked about it, Tyler looked confused, said Jessica was camera shy, that she'd stepped out of frame right before he took the shot. That seemed odd, but people have different comfort levels with photos. Maybe Jessica just didn't like having her picture taken. But then Tyler showed me more photos from their relationship, and they were all the same. Tyler alone, or Tyler with empty space where his girlfriend should be, or Tyler pointing at something off camera that apparently was Jessica. I started asking more questions about Jessica. What did she look like? Where was she from? What did she do for work? Tyler's answers were surprisingly vague for someone he'd been dating for over a year. He said she was brunette, maybe 5'6", worked in marketing, grew up in the Midwest. Generic details that could describe thousands of people. When I asked if I could meet Jessica during my visit, Tyler said she was busy with work, but maybe next time. He seemed disappointed about it, like he'd really wanted us to meet, but she'd cancelled at the last minute. The more he talked about her, the more something felt wrong. That night, I started putting pieces together. Tyler's girlfriend, Jessica, was supposedly from the Midwest, worked in marketing, and was very private about photos. Hannah's mysterious boyfriend, Jake, was supposedly from another state, and she'd been secretive about their relationship for over a year. The timeline matched up perfectly with when Tyler had started dating Jessica. I started thinking about all the times Hannah had been unavailable, claiming to be on video calls with Jake, all the times she'd disappeared for hours saying she was on virtual dates, all the secretive text messaging and phone calls. What if Jake and Jessica were the same person? What if Hannah was catfishing Tyler? The idea seemed insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Hannah had been weird about Tyler dating someone new from the beginning. She'd always been a little jealous of my relationships, competitive in ways that weren't always healthy, and she had access to information about Tyler through me, knew his interests, his personality, his vulnerabilities. I needed proof before I could accuse my best friend of something so elaborate and manipulative. So I started paying more attention to Hannah's behaviour, looking for patterns. Every time she claimed to be talking to Jake, I'd text Tyler to see if he was talking to Jessica. The timing matched up perfectly, every single time. Then I got bold and asked Tyler to describe a recent conversation he'd had with Jessica. He told me about this long discussion they'd had about childhood memories, about growing up in small towns, about feeling like outsiders in high school. I knew those stories because they were Hannah's stories, experiences she'd shared with me over the years. The final confirmation came when Tyler mentioned that Jessica had sent him a care package. He was so excited about it, said she'd included his favourite candy, some books he'd mentioned wanting to read, and a handwritten note that made him cry. He showed me the package and I recognised Hannah's handwriting immediately. I confronted Hannah that same week, didn't beat around the bush, just asked her directly if she was catfishing Tyler. She denied it at first, acted offended that I'd even suggest something so crazy. But when I started listing all the evidence, all the coincidences, all the matching details, she broke down. She admitted everything. For almost 2 years, she'd been pretending to be Jessica, Tyler's long-distance girlfriend. She'd created fake social media profiles, used photos of a random girl she'd found online, built an entire fictional identity. She'd been having hours-long video calls with Tyler where she'd hold the phone so he couldn't see her face, claiming technical difficulties or lighting issues. The worst part was her justification. Hannah said she'd done it because she could see how much Tyler missed me, how he'd never really gotten over our breakup. She convinced herself that she was helping him by giving him someone to talk to, someone who understood him. She claimed she'd planned to end the catfishing gradually, maybe have Jessica move away or break up with him gently. But then Tyler started falling in love with Jessica, started talking about visiting her, about their future together. Hannah got in too deep to back out without destroying him, so she kept it going, kept lying, kept building this elaborate fiction that was inevitably going to collapse. I was horrified. My best friend had been manipulating my ex-boyfriend for 2 years, making him fall in love with a person who didn't exist. She'd stolen stories from my life, used information I'd shared with her in confidence, betrayed both Tyler and me in ways I couldn't even process. I told Hannah she had to come clean to Tyler immediately, had to tell him the truth about Jessica, about the catfishing, about everything. She begged me not to make her do it, said it would destroy him, that he'd never recover from finding out he'd been in love with a lie. When Hannah refused to tell Tyler herself, I realised I had to do it. I couldn't let him continue living in this fantasy, planning a future with someone who didn't exist. He deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. I drove back to Tyler's school the next weekend and told him everything, showed him the evidence, explained Hannah's confession, laid out the entire 2-year deception. Tyler went through every emotion possible: denial, anger, heartbreak, betrayal. He'd been planning to propose to Jessica next month, had bought a ring, had been saving money to visit her. The aftermath was devastating for everyone involved. Tyler was crushed not just by the breakup, but by the realization that someone he'd trusted had manipulated him so completely. Hannah lost her best friend and had to live with the knowledge that she'd caused incredible pain to someone who'd never done anything to hurt her. I lost my best friend too. I couldn't forgive Hannah for what she'd done. Couldn't trust someone who was capable of such elaborate manipulation and deception. The friendship we'd built over years was destroyed by her selfishness and jealousy. Tyler and I don't talk anymore either. Not because of anger, but because I'm too connected to the source of his pain. Every time he sees me, he's reminded of Hannah, of Jessica, of the 2 years he spent falling in love with a lie. Hannah moved away a few months later, said she couldn't handle the guilt and the social fallout from what she'd done. I heard she's in therapy, trying to understand why she thought catfishing was acceptable, why she let it go on for so long. I still can't wrap my head around the level of deception involved. Creating fake profiles, maintaining a fictional identity for 2 years, watching Tyler fall in love with someone who didn't exist. The amount of time and energy Hannah put into this lie is staggering. Sometimes I wonder if I should have figured it out sooner, if there were signs I missed. But I never imagined my best friend was capable of something so manipulative and cruel. This is absolutely unhinged behaviour. 2 years of elaborate catfishing, stealing someone else's stories, watching a person fall in love with a complete fabrication. The psychological manipulation involved is terrifying, and the fact that she was planning to let him propose to a fictional person shows just how far she was willing to let this spiral. Some people really have no boundaries when it comes to their own twisted fantasies. This final story is going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. My mum asked me to pay for my sister's wedding because she spent the wedding fund on a cruise. I'm the oldest of 3 kids, always been the responsible one, the one who worked through college, saved money, made practical decisions. My sister Jenna is the middle child, and she's always been Mum's favourite. Not even subtle about it, just obvious preferential treatment her entire life. When Jenna got engaged last year, my mum was over the moon, started planning this elaborate wedding immediately, talking about venues and flowers and dresses like money was no object. Jenna wanted everything to be perfect, and Mum was determined to make it happen. Mum told everyone she'd been saving for Jenna's wedding since she was born, had a special account set aside just for this purpose, said she wanted to give her daughter the fairy tale wedding she'd always dreamed of. The budget she was talking about was around $30,000, which seemed reasonable for the kind of celebration they were planning. For months, Mum and Jenna spent every weekend visiting venues, tasting cakes, trying on dresses. They'd call me constantly to get my opinion on colour schemes and centerpieces, acting like I was intimately involved in the planning process, even though I lived 3 hours away and was barely consulted on actual decisions. I was happy for Jenna, honestly. She'd found a great guy, they seemed genuinely in love, and if Mum wanted to throw them an expensive party, that was her choice. I offered to help with whatever they needed, maybe handle some of the coordination, since I'm good at organising events. About 6 months before the wedding, Mum started making comments about how expensive everything was turning out to be. Said the venue costs were higher than expected. The catering was more elaborate than she'd planned. The flowers were seasonal and pricey, but she insisted everything was under control, that she had it handled. Then, 3 months before the wedding, Mum called me in a panic, said there had been a problem with the wedding fund, that some unexpected expenses had come up, that she was going to need help covering the final payments. She asked if I could loan her $5,000, just temporarily, until she could figure out the budget shortfall. I was suspicious, but agreed to help. $5,000 was a lot of money for me, but it was my sister's wedding, and I didn't want Jenna's big day to be ruined by financial stress. Mum promised she'd pay me back within a month, said it was just a cash flow issue. A month later, Mum asked for another $3,000, said there were more unexpected costs, that the wedding was turning out to be more expensive than anyone had anticipated. Again, I helped out, though I was starting to worry about where all this money was going and how Mum planned to pay me back. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mum dropped the bomb, called me crying, said she needed another $10,000 or they'd have to cancel everything. The venue wanted final payment, the caterer needed their deposit, the florist was threatening to pull out. She was completely panicked, begging me to save Jenna's wedding. At this point, I'd already lent her $8,000 with no clear plan for repayment. Another $10,000 would basically wipe out my emergency fund, money I'd been saving for years. But the wedding was in 2 weeks. Jenna had already sent invitations, and I couldn't bear the thought of my sister's wedding being cancelled. So I gave Mum the money. $18,000 total, nearly my entire savings account. She promised she'd start paying me back immediately after the wedding, said she just needed to get through this crisis, and then everything would be fine. The wedding was beautiful. Jenna looked gorgeous, the venue was perfect, everything went off without a hitch. Mum spent the entire day accepting compliments on how lovely everything was, how perfect the planning had been, how generous she was to give her daughter such an amazing celebration. After the wedding, I started asking Mum about repayment plans. She kept saying she needed a few more weeks to get her finances sorted out, that she was working on it, that I shouldn't worry. Weeks turned into months, and I wasn't seeing any money. Finally, I sat Mum down and asked her directly what had happened to the wedding fund she'd supposedly been saving for years. Where had all that money gone? Why had she needed to borrow so much from me when she claimed to have everything covered? That's when she broke down and told me the truth. There had never been a wedding fund. She'd spent years talking about saving for Jenna's wedding, but she'd never actually set aside any money for it. Every dollar I'd given her had gone directly to wedding expenses because she'd had no savings whatsoever. But it gets worse. About 6 months before Jenna's engagement, Mum had gone on an expensive cruise with her boyfriend. 2 weeks in the Mediterranean. Fancy cabin, excursions at every port. The whole luxury experience. She'd spent over $15,000 on that trip. Money she'd taken from her general savings account. When Jenna got engaged and Mum realised she actually needed to pay for a wedding, she panicked. She'd spent the money she should have been saving for her daughter's future on a vacation for herself. Rather than admitting this to Jenna or scaling back the wedding plans, she decided to manipulate me into funding the entire celebration. I was furious. Mum had lied to me for months, let me believe I was helping with a temporary cash flow problem, when actually I was paying for my sister's entire wedding. She'd spent years bragging about how she was saving for this day, then spent the money on herself and expected me to cover the difference. When I confronted Mum about the cruise, she got defensive, said she deserved to enjoy her life, that she'd worked hard and earned the right to take vacations, said I was being selfish for begrudging her a little happiness, completely ignored the fact that she'd lied to me and manipulated me into paying for something that was supposed to be her responsibility. I demanded that she start paying me back immediately. $18,000 was serious money, and I needed it back. Mum said she couldn't afford to repay me right away, that her budget was tight, that I'd have to be patient. Suggested maybe I could consider it a gift to Jenna, a wedding present from her big sister. That's when I realised Mum had never intended to pay me back. She'd manipulated me into funding Jenna's wedding by making me think it was a temporary loan, when actually she was planning to treat it like a gift I'd volunteered to give. I told Jenna everything, explained that Mum had lied about the wedding fund, that she'd spent the money on a cruise, that I'd paid for the entire wedding under false pretenses. I expected Jenna to be as outraged as I was, to demand that Mum find a way to repay me. Instead, Jenna got angry at me, said I was trying to ruin her marriage by bringing up money issues, that I should have talked to Mum privately instead of involving her. She actually suggested that since I made more money than Mum, I could afford to lose $18,000 more easily than Mum could afford to pay it back. The family basically chose sides, and I was outnumbered. Mum and Jenna painted me as the selfish sister who was trying to hold money over everyone's head, who couldn't just be happy that the wedding had been beautiful. Extended family members started weighing in, saying I should be more generous with family, that money isn't everything. I ended up taking Mum to small claims court to try to get my money back. Had to sue my own mother to recover the $18,000 she'd manipulated me into lending her. The whole process was humiliating and expensive, but I couldn't afford to just write off that much money. During the court proceedings, everything came out. The cruise receipts, the timeline of when Mum had asked for money, the fact that there had never been any wedding savings. The judge ruled in my favour, ordered Mum to repay me in monthly instalments over 2 years. Mum was furious about the judgment, said I'd embarrassed the family by airing our businesses in court. She made the minimum payments required by law, but treated me like I was some kind of loan shark the entire time. Family gatherings became incredibly awkward, with Mum barely speaking to me and Jenna acting like I was the villain in the situation. The worst part was how Mum continued to play the victim. She'd tell people that I'd sued her over helping with wedding expenses, conveniently leaving out the part about lying to me and spending the wedding money on a cruise. She painted herself as a generous mother who'd been betrayed by her ungrateful daughter. It took almost 3 years to get all my money back. 3 years of tense family relationships, awkward holidays, and passive-aggressive comments about how money had torn our family apart. Mum never once apologised for lying to me, or acknowledged that she'd manipulated me into paying for something that was supposed to be her responsibility. Jenna and I barely speak now. She never got over the fact that I'd involved the courts in what she considered a family matter. She acts like I'm the one who created the problem by expecting to be repaid for money I'd lent under false pretenses. The whole situation taught me that some people will exploit family loyalty without any guilt whatsoever. Mum knew I'd help if she presented it as a temporary emergency, so she constructed an elaborate lie to manipulate me into funding her daughter's wedding after she'd spent the money on herself. I've learned to be much more careful about lending money to family members. Now I ask detailed questions, require written agreements, and don't just trust that people are being honest about their financial situations. It's sad that I have to treat my own family like potential scammers, but that's what happens when trust gets broken so completely. Looking back, I should have demanded to see bank statements before lending any money. Should have asked more questions about where the supposed wedding fund had gone. But I trusted my mother, and she took advantage of that trust to solve a problem she'd created by prioritising her own pleasure over her daughter's future. The cruise photos are still on her Facebook page, by the way. Smiling pictures from her Mediterranean vacation, the one she funded by spending money that should have gone to my sister's wedding. Every time I see those photos, I'm reminded of how easily she manipulated me and how little remorse she's shown about the whole situation. This story makes my blood boil. A mother who lies to her own daughter, spends wedding money on a luxury cruise, then manipulates another daughter into paying for the entire celebration. The audacity of then trying to make him feel guilty for wanting his money back is absolutely staggering. And the sister taking Mum's side after finding out she paid for her own wedding? Family dynamics can be so incredibly toxic when people refuse to take accountability for their actions. Well, there you have it. 4 stories that prove reality is definitely stranger than fiction. These people shared their most unbelievable experiences with complete strangers on the internet. And honestly, I'm grateful they did, because this content is absolutely wild. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, first of all, thank you for sticking around. Second, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button, because I clearly spend way too much time finding these stories for your entertainment. And it would mean a lot to know you're here for more of this chaos. And that's the power of Reddit, folks. People living through situations so unbelievable that they have to share them with strangers on the internet just to process what happened. These stories remind us that no matter how normal your life feels, there's always someone out there dealing with absolute chaos that makes your problems seem manageable. What gets me about these stories is how they all start the same way. Someone thinking they understand their situation, trusting the people around them, going about their normal routine. Then reality comes crashing in and reveals that nothing was what it seemed. The girlfriend stealing food while helping catch the thief, the sister committing identity theft, the boss prioritizing romance over business, the best friend living a double life for 2 years, the mother funding cruises with wedding money. These aren't just stories about bad people doing bad things. They're about how quickly trust can be shattered, how people we love can become strangers, how the people closest to us sometimes know exactly which buttons to push to get what they want. They're about boundaries, consequences, and what happens when someone finally says enough is enough. Every single one of these people thought they knew the rules of their relationships, thought they understood the people in their lives. But life has a way of teaching us that assumptions can be dangerous, that blind trust can be costly, and that sometimes the person causing all your problems is the last person you'd suspect. The crazy part is, these stories are happening everywhere, all the time. Right now, someone is discovering their roommate isn't the thief. Someone is finding out their family member is using their identity. Someone is realizing their workplace situation is completely unsustainable. Someone is learning their friend has been living a lie. Someone is being manipulated by their own parent. Maybe that's why these stories resonate so much. They remind us that we're not alone in dealing with complicated, messy, sometimes unbelievable human behavior. That other people have survived betrayal, manipulation, and family drama and lived to tell about it. If you're still here after all that chaos, I genuinely appreciate you spending your time with these stories. Hit subscribe if you want more of this kind of content, because apparently the internet never runs out of wild situations that people need to share. Until next time, stay vigilant out there.